presidency ended in one of the biggest scandals in American history. But what happened after the cameras stopped rolling? His daughters, Tricia and Julie, once graced the covers of magazines, stood by his side in the White House, and married into two of the most powerful political dynasties in the country. But after Watergate, the resignation, and the disgrace, they disappeared from the spotlight. So where are they now? What happened to the Nixon daughters? Number 2. Tricia Nixon Cox, born February 21, 1946 in Whittier, California. She was the original Nixon daughter. Tricia was always seen as the more reserved sibling, the quieter one. But don't confuse quiet with weak. Tricia was sharp and elegant, with a mind of her own. She went through some of the best schools around: Horace Mann, Sidwell Friends, Chapin, and eventually landed at Boston College, where she earned a degree in English in 1968, the same year her dad was elected president. Now, here's a fun throwback. In 1964, she was presented as a debutante at the International Debutante Ball in New York City. Her escort? Edward Cox, a well-bred, well-connected law student from Princeton. They hit it off and kept dating all through college. When Tricia got married in 1971, she didn't just walk down any aisle. She walked down the White House Rose Garden. That's right. She had the first ever outdoor wedding of a presidential daughter at the White House. The whole world was watching. It was basically the royal wedding of the decade. The media was obsessed. Headlines screamed about her dress, her smile, the flowers. But once the wedding was over, Tricia pulled back. Hard. She and Ed Cox had one child, Christopher Nixon Cox, in 1979. He went on to become an attorney and even tried his hand at politics, running for Congress in New York. Unlike Julie, Tricia wasn't much for the spotlight. She kept her public appearances minimal and lived most of her adult life in the suburbs of New York. But that doesn't mean she disappeared. Tricia quietly served on the boards of several medical and philanthropic foundations. And, like her sister, she played a role in the Richard Nixon Foundation, working to preserve and shape her father's legacy. Despite being more reserved, Tricia had her moments of flair, like that time in 1968 when she went on a date with George W. Bush. Yep, future president. It didn't go well. Reportedly, he spilled wine and tried to sneak a cigarette. And Tricia was so unimpressed, she asked to be taken back to the White House early. Or when Prince Charles visited the U.S. in 1970, and there were whispers that he and Tricia were being pushed together. Charles later joked, "That was the time when they were trying to marry me off to Tricia Nixon." Number 1. Julie Nixon Eisenhower. Born July 5, 1948, in Washington, D.C., Julie was always described as sharp, poised, and more outspoken than her older sister. In public, she had a calm grace, but behind the scenes, she was a firecracker. Her childhood was a blur of high expectations. Raised partly in California, partly in D.C., she bounced between prestigious schools like Sidwell Friends and Chapin in Manhattan. Eventually, she ended up at Smith College, graduating in 1970, right when her dad was president. Oh, and she didn't stop there. She also got her master's in elementary education from Catholic University just a year later. Now here's the twist. While in college, Julie fell in love with David Eisenhower. Yep, that Eisenhower. Dwight D. Eisenhower's grandson. In a literal merging of presidential dynasties, they got married on December 22, 1968, in a ceremony so formal it could have doubled as a state dinner. The wedding was officiated by none other than Reverend Norman Vincent Peale, the same guy who basically invented positive thinking. The union of Nixon and Eisenhower families? Yeah, that was major. The two went on to have 3 kids, Jenny, who became an actress, Alexander, and Melanie. Julie wasn't just playing house, though. During her father's presidency, she hit the ground running, traveling, advocating for children, the elderly, and the environment. She wasn't content to be a background figure. From 1973 to 1975, she worked as the assistant managing editor of the Saturday Evening Post. Not a figurehead position, she actually helped create a whole book division. And she wrote a lot. Some highlights: Pat Nixon, The Untold Story, 1986. A deep dive into her mother's life, Special People, 1977. Profiles of people who inspired her, Julie Eisenhower's Cookbook for Children, 1975. Yep, she made cooking cool for kids, and she later co-authored Going Home to Glory, 2010, with her husband, about life with Ike in his final years. But writing wasn't just about publishing books. It was about setting the record straight. Julie became one of the most passionate defenders of her father's legacy after Watergate. When the media turned on Nixon, Julie stood firm. She gave interviews, lectures, and even sparred with reporters. She refused to let history paint him in a one-dimensional way. In the 80s and 90s, she became a trustee of the Richard Nixon Foundation, continuing to shape how the world saw her father. Behind closed doors, she worked tirelessly to build exhibits, support scholarship, and run charitable causes. And for her efforts, she was named one of Good Housekeeping's 10 most admired women in America, more than once. Julie and Tricia Nixon may not be in the headlines anymore, but their stories are worth remembering, because they show that resilience, grace, and even humor can survive just about anything.